Hello, everybody. Welcome to Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr on. Tom, it is the 100th episode of this particular podcast. It's been going strong for, about 17 years now. I remember when we first started doing this, we would record tapes for each other and then mail them off through campus mail. And, listen to them and reply to them with our own tapes. And it wasn't really listenable for anybody else, but it was a good time.
This podcast started as the Most Fire mixtape of 1997. So those were the glory days. Kids today just don't understand with their Discman and what have you.
It's really annoying with them listening to stuff that they want to hear whenever they want to hear it at the tips of their fingers. And, we had to go uphill both ways to listen to podcasts back in the 90s.
It was just, there was just one podcast and it was just about stuff. Like there was just one and it was about everything in the universe. And there was only one radio station and they just played Kaja Gugu songs all the time. It was terrible. Don't go back in time ever.
It was the worst. And now we're living in the best times because, that's what technology does for us. It makes everything better, including this show, which is, I'd say it's, I don't want to toot our own horn, Tom, but it's better than like 30 episodes ago, I'm sure.
How long ago was Shannon on the show?
I didn't want to say that. He might be listening.
We miss you, Shannon.
So let's go ahead and start the show. There's been some news. There's plenty of news. I think we sat down to start recording this and it popped out that Zach Harrison is going to announce on the early signing day, which is Wednesday the 19th, the beginning of the early signing period. And Tom, there won't be any announcement at his school, which is unfortunate because I'm about, 8 miles away or 8 minutes away. There will be it's just going to be an announcement on Twitter behind his private account. And so there will be some delay in finding out, but, maybe like 6 seconds, it'll pop up on somebody's feed and it'll all be out. But at that point, and I wrote about it on Tuesday, that this is the first battle between Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh. And I was thinking back when Urban took over, there was like the Kyle Kalis thing, but, Kalis told him no. There was when Jim Harbaugh took over, there was the Mike Weber thing, and Ohio State eventually won there. I was looking back to when Jim Tressel took over, and Pat Massey was a big Ohio prospect, but I don't recall if there was any, if there was an ongoing battle at the end or if he had long been a Michigan man. But this is, Zach Harrison is the number 4 player in the country right now. This is the biggest thing that is happening right now in the Ohio State sphere as it relates to not just Ohio State, but also as it relates to Michigan. And if you can make Michigan weaker, then you're automatically making yourself stronger. But if you're doing that with Zach Harrison, then you're just doubling it up. And if Ryan Day is going to, put his stamp of, himself on Ohio State, this would be probably the best way to start it before the Rose Bowl.
This would be a fantastic start to the Ryan Day era for sure. Because if you go back a month ago, the consensus was Michigan's going to murder Ohio State on the football field, and then they're going to get Zach Harrison out of Central Ohio, one of the top prospects that Ohio has produced in, a decade and a half?
Since 2004, the highest ranked recruit since Ted Ginn.
Yeah, since Ted Ginn. So that was the narrative swinging towards Michigan and, this is it. And then the game happens and Michigan comes down and just gets their faces kicked in for 60 minutes. And then if Harrison ends up staying at Ohio State, that mitigates a lot of the talk this year that, this is the end. This is the beginning of the end of Ohio State without Urban Meyer. And how much does the narrative during the off season really impact anything? I don't know, but it would probably be a more pleasant off season for Ohio State fans if the narrative is, look at Ryan Day, things are just going to keep rolling, and Michigan is never ever ever going to overtake Ohio State again. Because that I think is kind of where the narrative ends up, that Michigan thought, oh, they had this. They were going to win on the field. They were going to win off the field. If they then go 0 for 2 there, that's a pretty big knife between the ribs for them.
Definitely. And some things to know about Zach Harrison. First, he's 6'6", 240, ran a 4.47 at the opening, and is a very private guy, doesn't like a lot of drama, and is just looking for a place that he feels most comfortable. He's not looking for hype. He's not looking for the glitz and the glamour. He just wants to find a place where he's comfortable. And apparently he had grown really close with a lot of the Michigan players, so that's why the Wolverines were seen as the favorite for a while. But if you look at the two programs right now, yes, Urban Meyer is leaving, and that causes some upheaval. But what Gene Smith and Ryan Day and Urban Meyer had talked about was making this a smooth transition. And really, if you look at the two programs right now, even though Ohio State is losing arguably its best coach ever, there might be less drama at Ohio State than there is at Michigan. Because right now, that I think most players would know, most recruits would believe that Ryan Day is going to be there their entire time. And Michigan fans will tell you Jim Harbaugh will be there in the next 4 years. Every year his name gets mentioned in the NFL, though, and Jim Harbaugh says that's negative recruiting put out there by other coaches, and it's probably true. But Ohio State has been the mark of consistency. Michigan has as well, but it's been a worse consistency. Like, you can be 7-7 every year, 7-5 every year, and you're really consistent. It's not a great consistency. Ohio State has been a higher level of consistency. And I was thinking about this before the show when Urban Meyer is very, I could say, maybe not melodramatic, but maybe melodramatic. He exaggerates some things at times. He's maybe a little too, I don't know, I don't want to say high energy, but sometimes he can be a little much for people, for players, for coaches. And I wonder if him stepping down may even help Ohio State's chances, because it eliminates the questions, Tom, about Urban Meyer's future. We know what it is. So Zach Harrison knows what Ohio State's future looks like, and the assumption for every recruit is that you're going to win. So that's really not even much of a consideration. I think you just believe that you're going to win, and you believe that you're going to go to the NFL. But it would seem that maybe the quieter, safer path at this point would be Ohio State, and that's not even getting into what Ohio State did for the Bosa's compared to what Michigan did for Rashawn Gary.
Yeah, there's that. There's a very, very clean, even, obvious player at your position who came in ranked around you, and look at where the Bosa's ended up versus look at where Rashawn Gary's going to end up. I think I have not looked at mock drafts in the last week or two, but it sure seems like Nick Bosa's higher on pretty much every draft board out there than Rashawn Gary is. And Gary actually came in as a slightly higher ranked prospect. So, I think that the Larry Johnson coaching future is maybe, if there's any question, there's that, because there's just been rumors about him. If Larry Johnson's going to be there for 3 years or 4 years, then you're going to get developed pretty well by Larry Johnson. He's got a fantastic track record. Larry Johnson probably has the best track record of developing defensive linemen of any coach of anywhere in the country, defensive line wise. So if you can come in knowing that you've got Ryan Day for the 3 or 4 years you're at Ohio State, you've got Larry Johnson for those 3 and 4 years. That answers a whole lot of questions, I think, because as much as Michigan can say and Jim Harbaugh can say, he's not going to the NFL. How many more years does Jim Harbaugh get to lose to Ohio State before Jim Harbaugh goes somewhere else, whether voluntarily or not? Does he, if he's John Cooper, very famously, was going to get fired after he lost his 5th Ohio State-Michigan game in 1992, and he tied it, and Gordon Gee said it was one of the greatest wins in Ohio State history, rather famously, because he didn't have to fire John Cooper, because he didn't go 0-5. Next year, Jim Harbaugh can go 0-5. At what point does that become too much for Michigan? At what point does it just not become acceptable anymore to lose to Ohio State every single year? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't necessarily think it's at next year, but if he's 0-5, maybe not. If he's 0-6, is that the point at which you have to pull the ripcord? 0-7? Like at what point? Because you can't assume you're going to win, because you just thought you were going to win and you just got your doors blown off. So I don't know that they can just assume they're going to win next year and everything's magically going to be okay. I think that there's a perception from him that, I'm not going to the NFL, everything's fine, everything, but I don't know that even if he doesn't plan on going anywhere, I don't know that you could guarantee that he's going to be there for the next 3 years.
It's a crazy question and probably jinxing something by talking about it. But it would be, can you fire a coach based on one game if you're going like 9-3, 10-2 every year? And the answer is yes, we've seen it. But if you're losing, like at some point, it has to become unacceptable, or else it becomes acceptable. So if you don't fire him for losing to Ohio State, then it's okay to lose to Ohio State, and that should never happen, unless, of course, you're Penn State, and then you accept it because you're not rivals. But it's the whole thing. Like the coach is like, if you're not, whether you're teaching it or if you're allowing it, you're still, that's you're coaching it basically. You're allowing it to happen if it's bad. So yeah, that's a tough position to be in. But if it's not acceptable, then something has to change about it. And if you go well, we'll go one more year and then you lose close, is that like, you can't fire a guy after losing in double overtime and then you go, well, we'll give him one more year. And then, well, it was a 6-point loss. Ohio State had a game-winning drive at the end. I mean, you really can't fault him for that. So I guess the real answer is that he's not possibly going to lose 8 in a row or anything like that, because that would just be, yes, it would be funny. I mean, come on. No, Tom, do you think at 8 in a row, would that finally not be a mirage?
If you're wondering what Gerd is talking about there, Chase Winovich, the defensive end for Michigan, I'll just read the quote. It's a doozy. He said, I would say to any recruit or any potential guy that sees maybe what happened in the Ohio State game or is persuaded against coming here because of that, I would say that alone is a mirage, and what we've built here is a powerhouse. That's the Michigan I'm leaving, a Michigan that is headed in this trajectory where the sky is the limit. I mean, I think the first thing is a quick lesson in trajectory, which stops mattering the moment that the plane slams into the side of a mountain like it did 3 weeks ago in Columbus. So that's sort of a relevant data point on the trajectory there. But I don't. Do you want to talk, or do you want me to just go on a rant for 17 minutes? Because I can do it. It's fine. Yeah,
well, I'll give you your time. I would just say the sky is only the limit if you're pointed up. If you're pointed over, then the limit would be like what's in front of you. And as we've seen, Ohio State has been in front of them. But I will cede my 5 minutes to the gentleman from Granville.
Okay. So what part of Michigan losing to Ohio State was a mirage or a fluke? You gave up the most points in regulation since 1891 that your school has given up. 1891. This was not like, a punt hit a player in the back and then you lost, or the game-winning field goal hit the crossbar and bounced out and it was no good. Like, this was not like, it was really close. No, you got your head caved in for 60 minutes. you have lost all 5 years you were at Michigan. Michigan lost the 2 years before that. They've lost 14 of 15 in the series. Michigan has lost 2 games or more every year since 1997. They have lost or tied 2 games or more in every year but that 1 year. Every year except 1997. They have lost or tied 2 games every year since 1974. Gerd, quick. Which team has more seasons of fewer than 2 losses or ties since 1974? Rutgers or Michigan?
Oh, no. Rutgers?
No, it's a tie.
Oh,
Congratulations, Michigans. You have tied your ancient rivals from Piscataway. Great job. The idea of Michigan as a national powerhouse, it's a fantasy. It is a fantasy based on nothing but delusion and ancient history at this point. They've half of a national championship since 1948. Half. They shared the one in 1997 with Nebraska. Here are some teams. Syracuse has an undisputed, like coaches and AP poll in the same year. Syracuse has an undisputed national championship more recently than Michigan. BYU does. Pitt does. Quick, how many current Big Ten members have an undisputed national championship more recently than Michigan? Gerd?
I will say 5.
Wrong. 6.
Ouch.
6 teams in the Big Ten have an undisputed national championship more recently than Michigan. Ready? Ready for this list? Michigan State, 1952. Maryland, 1953. Minnesota, 1960. Nebraska has 3. Penn State has 2. Ohio State has 3. 6 Big Ten teams. Like, here are some other teams that have half a title since 1948. Ready? This is your company. Half of a national championship since 1948. Iowa, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Colorado, Georgia Tech. This is the level that you're playing at. Those are all teams that have at least one season with 2 or fewer ties and losses since 1974. You can go back to 1899, and there is no span of time in which Michigan has more wins than Ohio State. Between 1899 and now, the Ohio State leads the series since 1908. So all the vaunted, most wins in college football history and leads the Ohio State series, that's all based on stuff that happened before 1908. There is this absolute fantasy that Michigan is this national powerhouse, and there is absolutely nothing factual to base that on. They are just go through the years, and it's like 3-loss season, 4-loss season, 3-loss season, 4-loss season, 2-loss season, 3-loss season, 4-loss season. And there's this idea that, they're a national championship caliber program. They've just been in a down cycle. They've been in a down cycle since the Marshall Plan. Like, this is just, it has literally been 70 years since they won a national championship undisputed. And this week, when there was a safety from Oklahoma, Daxton Hill, who flipped from Michigan to Alabama. And, there was the usual chorus of Michigan bloggers and fans on Twitter saying, the boosters must have, cashed it, they must have cashed a check from the boosters. And what other explanation could there be? Like, really, what is more suspicious? A kid going to a team that plays for the national championship every year? Or a 5-star kid choosing to play for a team that keeps tripping over itself every year and has won half of a national championship in 70 years? Like, if you think about it, one of those is more suspicious, and it's not Alabama. So, I guess Chase Winovich may not know what a Mirage is. I guess is the TLDR there.
The thing is, like, Ohio State's dominance over Michigan is perhaps the only thing in college football that is not a mirage, because it spans 6 head coaches. It spans Urban, Jim Tressel, Lloyd Carr, Rich Rodriguez, Brady Hoke, and Jim Harbaugh. Like, Alabama right now, it spans 1 coach. Clemson, it spans 1 coach. When those guys are gone, who knows what's going to happen there. Ohio State over Michigan has been going on, well, you said it, since 1908, but more recently since 2001. That is not a mirage. That is, I mean, that's the past, present, and possibly the future. And we've seen, going back to the show on Amazon, like Chase Winovich talks more trash than anybody. But I'm starting to think, I don't think it's because he's cocky. It seems now, I think he's delusional. And maybe he believes these things. And then when he's talking about, we're going to come back stronger and we're going to remember this next year. What did remembering last year do for you? What did remembering the year before that do for you? What did remembering the year before that do for you? What has the memory done for you? It has done nothing for you. And, we're talking about building a powerhouse. It's like if the Mayans still wanted a front row at the United Nations. Like, you're the Mayans. We know about you. We've heard about your calendar. But come on, we're trying to run a globe here. We don't have time for this is how we used to do it. And that worked out fine. Maybe it worked out fine for you and your little patch of ground. But, we've got bigger things going on. We've got modern things going on. And, I don't want to say modern college football has passed Michigan by because as we've talked about many, many times, this is what Michigan is. Jim Harbaugh has gotten them back to their level, their heights. And their heights are, like you said, it's 2 losses every single year at the very least. And that's not, I guess that is the best trajectory that Michigan can hope for because that's all they've ever known. And so, I guess the idea that Ohio State and Michigan is a mirage is so, I don't know, like, does he mean like a casino?
It seems just absolutely like wish casting. Like, what else is he going to say at this point? They had their big revenge tour and there was lots of talk and then they just absolutely just get disemboweled by Ohio State. And so what do you say after that? Like you came in as the number 1 defense in the country and you're going to shut them down and you're going to get revenge and Karan Higdon is guaranteeing victory. And then you give up 62 points and was it 700 yards, 600 yards? Like an absurd amount of yards. Like it wasn't like, there were 17 blocked punts that just, they fluked into a blowout. They got absolutely annihilated in every phase of the game. So what else do you say at this point? But like, this is how you end up a punchline.
Yeah.
You come out and, because I don't think we didn't explicitly make this transition on the podcast, but when Chase Winovich is talking about what he would say to any recruit or any potential guys that sees maybe what happens in the Ohio State game or is persuaded against coming here because of that, there's a real smooth transition from the Zach Harrison conversation to this. It was sort of implied, but let me spell it out for you. That's who he's talking to right there. So, if your argument to Zach Harrison is no, they didn't really beat us by 3 touchdowns and score 62 points against us. That was, don't believe your lying eyes. Like, I don't know what else they have at this point. Like they've lost 7 in a row. They just got completely annihilated. They thought they were going to go to the playoff. They're going to they're playing instead at noon on December 29th against Florida in the Peach Bowl. Like I don't. What else do they have other than gaslighting people at this point? Like there's no rational argument to make. So I guess that's all they have right now. I don't know.
Well, the playoffs begin on the 29th, if I'm correct. So, they wanted to play on the
Atlanta,
29th. They don't. Not at 11 o'clock. They don't. Yeah, he's talking about. It wasn't us. It happened. It is what it is, and we're going to look it in the face. It wasn't us being way worse than Ohio State. We just had a bad day, and they capitalized on it. Just like we've been doing, we're coming back stronger, and we're going to remember this next year. It wasn't us. It happened. Contradictory right there. We're going to look it in the face, but when we're looking at it, we're going to call it a mirage. either you're looking at it in the face or you're like looking past it and trying to ignore it. And you mentioned Ohio State disemboweling them. It's like Ohio State was a jaguar and they were, say an impala. I don't know if these two animals live on the same continent, but Ohio State, pounces on them, guts them, takes them up into a tree to begin eating them. And Chase Winovich is like, our trajectory got us into this tree. Like, no. Ohio State put you in its jaws and took you up into that tree and is now eating you. All right. So keep in mind why you are where you are. Sometimes you're in a tree. Other times you're in third place in a division. And sometimes you're as close to the playoffs that you can almost touch it. And then you get a 60 burger put on you. And now we're here. So I thank you, Chase, for making every week an entertaining week, especially this one. I feel bad for him in that he does so much talking. He's just a college kid, whatever. But he talks so much on the field and off the field. And I just wish he could have a little bit of like, man, we got our butts kicked that day. And just some like self-realization that it wasn't a mirage, that it wasn't a fluke, that this is the norm. Like, it's like walking into your house every day. It's like, this mirage is here again. My car Mirage is in the driveway again. My Mirage family is here to greet me again after work. Like this, at some point, you have to begin to live in reality and not see all of these wavy lines. And, as Mike Weber is running by you or Dwayne Haskins is, throwing around you or Isaiah Prince is stoning you. These aren't mirages. They're very real. And now they're kicking another extra point.
I don't remember. I did not look up the stats for the Michigan game. Did Chase Winovich have a sack or a tackle in that game? Because I remember after the game thinking that both he and Rashawn Gary were pretty quiet that whole game. So.
He may have had a couple of tackles. There were no sacks, though.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess if anything was a mirage that day, I would say it was the Michigan pass rush. But
dang. All right.
We're not here to talk about the past. Let's talk about the future, or at least the present.
The present, which takes us to Ryan Day's first big move, not unexpected, and that's announcing Brian Hartline as the full-time wide receivers coach at Ohio State. Well earned, you could say, Tom. I mean, this is probably the best group of wide receivers production-wise that we've ever seen, but it's also the best passing game that we've ever seen, so the two go hand in hand. But he's shown himself as a recruiter. He has certainly, like every single receiver has put up, their career year. Even Austin Mack was well on his way and still almost had his best year ever. Ben Victor, there wasn't as much room for him once. There's just so many other guys, and they all played well. And this was definitely a good move for Ohio State, for Ryan Day. Brian Hartline seems like definitely a young up-and-comer who has a lot of other coaches' attention and certainly got the players' attention. We talked to them during camp. Well, maybe not camp because everything was shut down, but when we did talk to them about Brian Hartline, they talked about all of the I guess the cachet that he brought from the NFL, the tips and the tricks that he learned there. And I have not heard anybody try to even posit that he has not made this group much better than they were before he took over.
No, I don't think there's any kind of a case to be made that he has not been a positive for that team this year. All of those wide receivers had good years. Like you said, even Austin Mack. Chris Olave came out of basically nowhere, showed up during the summer, and was an impact player towards the end of the year. I mean, there's you can't absolutely guarantee, that this was 100% him, the difference in the passing game between last year and this year, because obviously the JT Barrett to Dwayne Haskins change makes an impact, and that's obviously going to help the passing game downfield and with the accuracy and with the arm strength and all that. But I didn't see anything to me that suggested that the wide receiver coach position was not substantially better this year. The routes looked better. The technique was good. Guys all performed pretty consistently. You didn't have games with 17 drops. It didn't seem like, there were a few games where they had some drops, but it wasn't like you're not going to catch 100% of passes all season. That's just not realistic. But they, I think, were very consistent all year. It wasn't like one guy had a great year. It was Terry McLaurin had a really good year. Johnny Dixon had a really good year. KJ Hill had a really good year. Paris Campbell had a really good year. Austin Mack was having a very good year. And Chris Olave at the end comes on and has a really good year. And, Ben Victor kind of flashed at times, but that's sort of what Ben Victor does. He, flashes and then goes away for a while, and then you sort of forget about him, and then he makes a game-saving catch at Maryland or Penn State. Like, that's just kind of been his thing. But at this point, if I don't know how many guys that was, 6, 7, like 6 or 7 guys are all having really good years.
Even DeMario showed more as a receiver this year.
As he did. Like he didn't get on the field a ton. CJ Saunders didn't get on the field a ton, but he made some plays this year. Like, all the receivers had a good year. You really, there's Ben Victor's the only one that you could kind of go, he didn't have a real great consistent year, but he flashed. But if 8 of the top 9 guys are all having good years, then that's probably a pretty good indication that there's some coaching going on there that is facilitating those strong seasons.
And this being his audition season, having Dwayne Haskins as the quarterback is going to eliminate a lot of doubt, and that can either be good or bad, because if your receivers aren't crisp, he's going to expose them. If they are, then he's going to showcase everything that you're teaching these receivers. And granted, he had a very veteran group to work with, and that helps immensely. So that won't be the case next year. There will be more teaching involved. But as we saw with Chris Olave, quick learners, good teachers, the two go hand in hand. But having Dwayne Haskins, it's like if you want to go sing duets with Kenny Rogers. I mean, Tom, you better be able to sing, or Kenny Rogers is going to expose you. You try to sing Islands in the Stream with Kenny Rogers and you're not up for it, he will destroy you. And Dwayne Haskins is the Kenny Rogers of quarterbacks, pretty much. I don't know what country star would be the Tate Martell. I don't know. We've got all summer to work out all of these country music analogies that I can't wait for. And Tom, please continue with the show. Don't quit. But yeah, just having Dwayne Haskins to basically check your math is helped as well for Brian Hartline. Last year, was it the receivers? Was it the quarterback? This year, there were no, who's at fault here? And I think that helped. That gave Brian Hartline a very good canvas to paint his picture of coaching.
Yeah, I think now that you have an idea that if Brian Hartline has veteran wide receivers and a fantastic quarterback, then he can do pretty much whatever he wants. Like he's not going to screw that up. So that's good. That is something that is a good thing to know. Next year, I think it's the general assumption is you're not going to have Dwayne Haskins back next year. So you're going to have a little bit of a different looking offense next year with Tate Martell, and it's probably more back to the JT Barrett type zone read kind of offense. And you're going to have some younger wide receivers. And, I think that probably the expectations for next year are going to be dialed a little back from where they were this year. I don't think anyone's going to expect a 5,000-yard season passing from Tate Martell next year. But
we will.
But I think that you've seen enough out of the young wide receivers. You've got an Austin Mack coming back next year. You got a Chris Olave coming back next year. You got a DeMario McCall. I mean, you've got talented wide receivers out there who should be ready to step up and fill those voids that all those seniors are leaving, and potentially KJ Hill as well. I think that you have enough talent there that I think that the wide receiver position is going to be in good hands with Hartline for the foreseeable future. I I don't think it's going to look like it did this year, but that's not a realistic expectation. I think good, solid wide receiver play from here on out is a realistic expectation, and I think that's what you're going to see.
Yeah. You mentioned players leaving. Coaches will be leaving as well. I'm wondering how soon after the Rose Bowl that starts happening. The Rose Bowl is on a Tuesday, January 1st. I wouldn't expect, maybe a day or two to pass before other names are, before announcements are made about this guy going this place, that guy going that place, because they have to get this stuff done for recruiting purposes and either get the next guy in so that future recruits know who's coming. Or there's also the Greg Schiano was mentioned as wanting or being interested in the open Temple job. Temple, the Philly.com story had it that they wanted to get this done by the 19th, which would be, a week from Wednesday. And so if Greg Schiano goes to Temple while they're still preparing for the Rose Bowl, you might even get a name before the Rose Bowl as a replacement. But when people are asking, like, how soon will we see changes, Tom, I don't think you're going to have to wait long at all. Once this game is over, things are going to happen pretty quickly, if not even well before.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty likely that you're gonna know certainly by, I don't know, say January 10th. I think you're probably going to know if certain guys are not coming back. And I think there's probably a very good chance that Ryan Day knows which guys are not coming back, whether they know it or not. So, and then you have the guys like you said, like Schiano, who may, make the decision for him. But I do think you're gonna see those decisions made pretty quickly after the Rose Bowl. I would certainly hope that you don't have a Stan Drayton situation again. That was a little, the optics on that were not great. That was Stan Drayton, the running backs coach, left the day after National Letter of Intent Day. He was the running backs coach. He left the day after Mike Weber signed his national letter of intent to go to the NFL and go coach running backs for the Bears. So the optics there were not great. I would assume that they have learned from that particular mess and won't repeat that. And I think that they're going to want to have those guys in place just to, sort of get things moving and, close the recruiting class and know what they have moving forward. You don't want uncertainty can kill you in recruiting. You don't want uncertainty. You don't want questions looming about, hey, is this guy really going to be here? Is this guy headed out the door? Is he going to go? Is Greg Schiano going to leave or stay? You want to have stuff kind of locked down. And I would assume that Ryan Day probably, for the positions that he knows or thinks might be vacant, I would assume that he probably by this point has some names in mind to pull the trigger and fill those spots with. Because I think that Ohio State is in a position right now where there are not that many schools that people would not jump to Ohio State from as a coach. I think that's, you might not be able to pull someone as a lateral move from like an Alabama or a Clemson or something like that, but most other schools in the country, if you have targeted a coach as a potential replacement and talked to him maybe a little bit, then you probably have a pretty good sense that, yeah, this guy will jump if and when the position is open.
And look what Alex Grinch did last year. He was running his own defense at Washington State and came to Ohio State to be the co-defensive coordinator. Now, that's probably with the intention of taking over when Greg Schiano leaves, but it shows you that they can go get a Power 5 guy to take even a slight step down because it's Ohio State. And when we talk about like Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator / linebackers coach of Cincinnati, and why would he come to Ohio State to be a linebackers coach? Assuming, Tom, for a moment that a linebackers coach position will be open after this season, which we will assume for this exercise. But Marcus Freeman is making $270,000 right now. Cincinnati does not have much more money to pay him. Billy Davis is making $500,000 now as just a linebackers coach and friend. So Now, Marcus Freeman, if he wanted to be a Buckeye, could make twice what he's making, and I'm sure he would get some other title besides linebackers coach. So they have the ability to bring guys who are running a defense or running an offense and slap them with a co-title, or, give them a 1 year, wait us out and you'll see that you'll get the bump up, or you'll get Larry Johnson as assistant head coach. Tony Alford, I think, is an associate head coach of the offense. Kerry Combs at one time was assistant defensive coordinator or assistant co-defensive coordinator. So they'll give titles in order to justify the money so that they can go get people, like you said. So, but I would expect things to move pretty quickly. And I'm wondering, do we hear from Larry Johnson? There's questions that, will he retire? Anytime you're changing the head coach, you want to know from everybody, like, what are your intentions? And we won't talk to the coaches, I don't know, maybe until Pasadena. Who knows? We will talk to the players on Wednesday, but no coaches. So we don't really know. You wonder if an announcement or a release will be made that, like, yeah, Larry Johnson says, I'm here for 3 more years, or, I'm here. I have no intentions of retiring. I'm happy to continue this journey with Ryan Day. And if there is no statement or release and Zach Harrison maybe goes to Michigan, do we start to try to put the math together there, Tom?
Maybe. It's hard to read Harrison in particular because he's sort of a unique prospect, just personality-wise, and everything else. He's just so private that it's hard to assign motives to particular choices that he's making, because I think he's not necessarily motivated by the exact stuff that that a lot of other players are. But if Harrison goes to Michigan and Johnson retires, it's not unrealistic to think that certainly could have played a role. But there's 2 ifs there, and neither of them has happened yet. So and Johnson has been pretty consistent. He hasn't talked about it a ton this year, but I think he's been fairly consistent about the fact that he does not plan to retire. Yeah. So, and has not necessarily done it in the way that Urban Meyer did it, where it was kind of like, oh, I plan to coach, like, yeah, maybe. We had indications that Meyer planned to leave. I have not heard that same stuff about Larry Johnson. So that's, for whatever that's worth.
And you wonder if there is like no announcements of the people who are staying. Is that because you just don't want to make those announcements? Because if you announce 4 guys are staying, then the assumption is that the guys you haven't announced are leaving. And that's, as Ryan Day said at the introduction / goodbye press conference, he'll do these things after the game, and that's when stuff will be announced. Although I did find it interesting when he described the defense that he wants. It was aggressive and it was simple so that his players can play fast. And to me, he was describing what Chris Ash installed or what Alex Grinch runs, and was not describing at all what Greg Schiano runs, because the past couple of years we've run into situations where we're talking to Greg Schiano and, asking him, has the defense, do you need to simplify things? Do you need not necessarily dumb things down, but do you need to simplify things to keep your players from paralysis by analysis? And each of the last 2 years, it seems like he has had to simplify things, streamline things, so that players can not only play faster, but be more productive. We saw that this year with moving his linebackers off the line of scrimmage. Last year, and asking them, it's been so long, but asking them to not do as much, focus on certain things, and just basically simplify the plan of attack. And so we'll see what that ends up being, that does not sound to me, Tom, like Greg Schiano's defense. But I also think even if Greg Schiano is back, and I think that's one of the questions that we'll get to, one of the listener questions, whereas Urban Meyer was able to just allow Greg Schiano to do what he wants, Ryan Day is going to have a hand in everything, at least at the outset. And this is going to be his program. So whatever defense he wants, even if Greg Schiano is still here, Greg Schiano is going to have to run the defense that Ryan Day wants.
And I think there's a question as to how excited Greg Schiano would be to run that kind of defense. I think Greg Schiano has the Greg Schiano defense, and he wants to run the Greg Schiano defense. And that is not necessarily something that is something he's willing to change based on personnel or on-field results. I think maybe something that you could glean from segments of this season. So, yeah, I don't expect Greg Schiano to be back next year. That's not to say he won't be, but I think that I think that the most likely scenario for the defensive coordinators, Schiano and Grinch, is that Schiano goes somewhere else, whether that's, a head coaching job in the NFL, in college ranks, with Temple, or maybe goes and is a defensive coordinator in the NFL. If you run a defensive scheme that's complicated, you have a lot more time with players, rules wise, and time to teach and time to install stuff in the NFL than you do in college. So if you want to run a complicated defense, that may be a better landing spot for you. So we'll see. I mean, I think we'll know pretty soon after the Rose Bowl, but that would, and in Schiano's case, I mean, we may know next week if he takes the Temple job. So, but I think there's a pretty good inkling out there that he is looking around and plans on being somewhere else next year. I think that's probably fair to say, right?
Yeah, I think it would almost be uncomfortable if he returns, because it's not been a defense where the defensive coordinator should just assume that he gets to keep his job. And you've got, could he return if Alex Grinch is in charge? Would he be able to accept that? Does he? I think his sons, do they play at Bucknell? Maybe he'll go and coach Bucknell. I don't know. But it would be, as Maurice Clarett said, it's a humbling thing being humbled. And you wonder, can he take a step down? Can he, Ed Warner wasn't able to, Tim Hinton was able to. Not everybody can do that. And he's a guy who wants to be a head coach again. The Temple thing, I don't think the whole Penn State, Tennessee thing really matters to Temple. I think he'd be a good fit there because that's his neck of the woods, and he's shown that he can, build something from the ground up, and Temple has already been built up in a sense. I mean, it's a place where coaches can take their next coaching job and go from there. I think it'd be a good fit for him. You almost get to this point though where you're almost too old to be to go from coordinator to head coach. Like, a lot of teams are looking for the younger guys, the energetic guys. But I also think Greg Schiano could be looking for a place to just, I want to, my last 10, 15 years, just find a place that's home. And maybe that's, like Paul Johnson did at Georgia Tech, or just somewhere where you can just chill, and not chill because you can't, but just a place to call home. But I still think Greg Schiano would want more. I mean, last year he had agreed to become Tennessee's head coach. That's a place you don't have to leave. And it would be, it's a significant fall to then have that taken away from you. And then maybe Temple wants you. And if they don't, then does Ryan Day still want him? Does he end up as an analyst at Alabama next year? It's going to be an interesting situation if he does not find a head coaching job, what his options are. I don't know enough one way or the other to say that he'd have a spot here at Ohio State, but he is a very good coach. But can he coach somebody else's system willingly? Because he walked into great Chris Ash's system that was working, and he tweaked it and changed it to what we've got now here at Ohio State, and the results have not been great. So, I don't know. We'll find out, but it's interesting.
Yeah, he's 52, so he's not. If he wanted to coach another 10 to 12 years, he certainly could. So if he does, hypothetically, he gets the Temple job and he coaches them for 4 years, you could parlay that into a pretty good job. I mean, Jeff Collins just parlayed that into a pretty good job. Yeah. So that's and before him, Steve Adazio went from Temple to Boston College. You can turn that into a Power 5 job.
Matt Rule went to Baylor.
Matt Rule went to Baylor. Yeah, I mean that is a very good. You're in the AAC. The AAC is the 6th best conference, right outside of the Power 5. So if you win 9-10 games there, which you can do at Temple, that puts you close to the top of the list of coaches that are desirable for kind of Power 5 jobs. And if he's 4 years from now he's 54, that absolutely he could turn that into, say the Pitt job opens up, you get the Pitt job after that, or Virginia, or something like that, and that's a nice way to go out as your career ends. And you know what? If a year from now the Rutgers job opens up, Rutgers might take a look at him too. So and there's a pretty good chance the Rutgers job is going to open up in a year. So he could be back in the Big Ten sooner rather than later.
There will be, and there's always jobs open. It's just, will those places be willing to go with him? And I think Rutgers would definitely be one, because it would just be, coming back home. Everybody marriages the second time around always work. There's never been a second marriage that has ever, resulted in divorce. So, that's, we'll wish the best for them if that happens. Tom, I want to talk about Dwayne Haskins and the fact that we both believe that this is his last year at Ohio State. He is not going to be named a first-team All-American, which means he will not get a tree in Buckeye Grove. He will join Ezekiel Elliott as an all-time Ohio State great who does not have a tree in Buckeye Grove. And I don't get hung up on stuff like this or like hype or things, but if you're going to have a Buckeye Grove, and that's where all Ohio State's first-team All-Americans all have a tree and a plaque, if you've got this thing set up to acknowledge your all-time greats, and Dwayne Haskins isn't in it, and Ezekiel Elliott isn't in it, shouldn't there be some way to get them in it? This is a thing that is very important to the university, but it's ignoring some greats just based on the unfortunate years that they were playing. Like I think Ezekiel Elliott was playing at the same time as Melvin Gordon, and even though Ezekiel Elliott was not a first-team All-American, he did win the Sullivan Award as the nation's top amateur athlete. That would seem to trump any All-American, in my opinion. And you've got Dwayne Haskins, who there have been other Ohio State quarterback All-Americans. Troy Smith was one. Art Schleister was one. There's been some in the 30s. Les Horvath, quarterback halfback, in the 40s. But Dwayne Haskins is the best quarterback in school history. He should be in Buckeye Grove somewhere, or I don't know if he's just outside of it. And him and Ezekiel Elliott are like how like people have two stone pillars in their driveway, on each side. Maybe they can be like the stone pillars to Buckeye Grove, but they should be represented somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can be represented somewhere, but not change the criteria for Buckeye Grove. I think they have. I mean, obviously, there's a very firm criteria in place right now. First team All-American, you get a tree. Anything else, you don't. And there's a pretty firm criteria for getting your name and number up in the stadium, and that's Heisman Trophy. Yeah, Heisman Trophy, or be Chick Harley, or be
Bill Willis.
Bill Willis. Like there's and neither Ezekiel Elliott nor Dwayne Haskins meets any of those criteria. So I don't know that you want to tweak it to that degree. I think that there are other ways to honor them. You put stuff up in the Woody Hayes Center. I mean, this is like what Urban Meyer did with the and what Jim Tressel did with the great teams of Ohio State, where they have the sign that has the Big Ten championship teams, they have the sign that has the national championship teams, and then there's teams like the 2012 team that technically didn't even win its division because it wasn't eligible. So, I mean, they won the division because they were undefeated, but like technically, I think they might have technically won the division, but they didn't get to play in the Big Ten championship game. They got a trophy. So they got a trophy. So okay, so they technically won the division. They finished 12-0. There's a sign in the Woody Hayes that is just basically the great Ohio State teams, and there's no actual criteria for that other than the head coach says this is a great team. And so I think you can do, they certainly have plenty of places where they're honoring former players inside the Woody Hayes. So I think that you can certainly accommodate something like that. And, if they can figure out the thing with the banners inside Ohio Stadium with that Chris Spielman sued him over with the player likenesses and the company name on them, like do something like that. Just put the banners up and don't put Honda on them, and you're probably going to be okay. You can find a way to do that. You don't have to bend the criteria, because otherwise, I mean, there was like do you remember when we were at Penn State this year and we looked up at the side of the luxury boxes on the other side of the stadium and we're like, what are those years? Because it was like 1982, 1986, like, okay, those are national championship years. And then it was like 2012, and it was like, what the heck did they do in 2012? They went like 8-4. And we looked it up, and it was just like, Penn State, memorable teams. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, that's a little bit like the thing in the Woody with, the great teams of Ohio State. But that's a display inside the Woody Hayes where most people aren't actually going to see it. That's not like on the inside of your stadium as like, this is a team, one of the great teams in all of history, and like, congratulations, you went 8-4, like, way to go. So I think you have to be careful about bending your criteria to fit certain things, because I think it gets real easy to go, well, I mean, everyone loved JT Barrett, everyone loved Braxton Miller, everyone should have a tree in Buckeye Grove. And, at some point it stops being quite as, it's a big deal to get a tree there. And it should stay a big deal. And there's a lot of great players that don't have a tree there. So
name one.
I think you're wrong.
I didn't say they should be in it. I said they should be outside of it. I said they should be outside of it.
Name one player that doesn't have a tree in Buckeye Grove. Dwayne Haskins. Boom. Lawyered.
Don't use my arguments against me. So, Dwayne Haskins. You know what I think would be maybe a good compromise? To give Ezekiel Elliott and Dwayne Haskins their own, like, busts, awards, like little statues, like their own Heisman of their own, like Ezekiel Elliott jumping over an Alabama defender, turn that into a bronze statue, give him that, put that on, make two, give him one, put the other on display in the Woody, and people will be like, what's this award? And you just make up some name.
I have it. It's the Montgomery Burns Outstanding Achievement in the Field of Excellence Award.
Perfect. And for the guys who don't win awards, you just create bronze statues of them, little 50, 60-pound statues, and put those in there. I think that would be pretty cool. Dwayne Haskins, speaking of bronze statues, finishes a distant third in the Heisman Trophy this year, as we expected. Neither one of us really gives a crap about the Heisman. It's overblown, and it doesn't go to the best player in the country. It goes to the guy who had the quarterback or the running back who had the most positive attention at that point. Although this year, Tom, I think the top three were correct. Whatever order you want to go ahead and put them in. This is one of those years where, even though I rip on people for just voting quarterbacks, like, I don't know who else you would put in there, because these three guys were pretty spectacular. And I think any given year, each of those three had a season that would have normally won the award. The whole, even leading up to the award, the ESPN stuff, just focusing on Tua and the guy who won it, Kyler Murray from Oklahoma, when Reese Davis is getting ripped and saying, because they're interviewing just Tua and Kyler Murray on the set, and people are like, hey, there is a third guy invited to the actual thing. Why are you leaving him out? And he says it's unwieldy to do an interview with three people. And Tom, this is a guy who hosts a television show every week with three other people on the stage. This is his job. That's what he does all of the time. CBS was able to do it with all three. And it's stuff like this that ESPN does that gives fuel to Buckeye fans who think like ESPN is out to screw them or to ignore them or whatever, or to prove that ESPN is more embedded with their business partners, their real SEC business partners, than their semi-business partners in the Big Ten. But it was pretty disgraceful all the way around, their coverage leading up to. I didn't really watch much of it. I think I started watching it once they had Dwayne on, and then I watched the end just to see. But it was pretty standard, I guess, disrespect from ESPN the week leading up.
Yeah, it was like really unnecessary. That like it was, to the argument that it's unwieldy to have three people on the set. Like you said, he literally does that every week. Like, this is not that hard. I have produced a good amount of TV in my life. It is not that hard. You just take turns, you answer questions. This is rather rudimentary stuff. So that was kind of a dumb argument. They had a graphic on the front page of ESPN.com that had just Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa on there. Like, again, it's not that hard to put all three guys there, and to kind of pretend that he's not there is dumb. Like, if he was close enough to get invited, he's close enough to be part of the conversation. This was not like a completely foregone conclusion that he had no chance. He got invited to New York. He was the third place finisher. That's just, so, I mean, you're right. It whether they meant to do it this way or not, it fuels all of the conversation about what ESPN thinks of Ohio State and the Big Ten and everything else. And, I think that that's probably in general a little overblown, but if they want to try and downplay that and they want to show that that's not true, this was not the way to do it. So, and it's just kind of disrespectful to Haskins. He's there. He's not like some distant sixth place finisher where, first of all, I don't know why the stupid Heisman people don't just invite like the top 5 or 6 people. Like you can't afford 2 more plane tickets and 2 more hotel rooms. Come on, like, give me a break. You want to pretend you're some big important thing and you can't invite the top 5, top 6 kids? Come on.
And really, the schools would pay for it themselves just for the exposure.
Right. It's not like these kids are all flying charter. They're on a commercial flight from Columbus, Ohio to New York, or Oklahoma City to New York. Like, this is just, New York is rather famously a place that you can fly to from a lot of places. So it is not that hard to get 5 or 6 people. And I don't even remember, like, I have made a point to not watch the Heisman for years and years and years at this point now, because like you said, it's a stupid award that's given to dumb people, and the television product that showcases it is just unwatchable garbage every year, because it's 5 minutes of content that they stretch into an hour. But there was the year that Keenan Reynolds, the Navy quarterback, was a finalist. And I think they might have gotten guilted into inviting him, and it was like 5 players that year. But like this should not be a conversation. Like, it's the quarterback for Navy. Like, invite him. Why would you not invite him and honor him? He had a great year. He had a great career. Like, why would you not do this? Why is this even a conversation? So, but I think, like I said, this is not a position that either of us is taking now this week in the wake of Dwayne Haskins not winning the Heisman. No. This has long been the editorial position of this podcast. The Heisman is maybe the most overrated award in all of sports. So it was awesome. It was very cool that Dwayne Haskins got to make the trip to New York. It was cool that he got to be a part of that. It was nice that he got honored to the degree that he did get honored. I think that, if anything, it made Ohio State fans appreciate him even more, because you see him getting left out, and it's like, hey, this guy had a really amazing career and, maybe a really amazing season, and Ohio State fans maybe are recognizing that even more now. And after some of the statistical conversations about how great his year was compared to the other two guys, there is a very compelling case that he was at least equal to, if not better than, those guys in some ways. But so this is not a Dwayne Haskins thing at all, and this is not a retrospective anger at anything from last weekend. That's just the Heisman is bad, and you shouldn't care.
Yeah, we could have done this any week. What does kind of suck is somebody at the availability for the Heisman finalist asking Dwayne Haskins, who do you think should win, Tua or Kyler?
Who was that? Do you know who that was? I never saw that reporter identified.
No, I'll ask this week. But that alone, it shows you the level of, like, I don't know if disrespect is the right word, just unintelligence or like ignorance or lack of a filter, that you would ask such a question to somebody who is there as a finalist. And, my other beef I have is with Heisman voters who will throw a defender, like, you vote for first, second, and third. And the Heisman voters who vote for defender third to show, like, hey man, I'll pick up, I'll vote for anybody. Like, well, no, you won't. That guy's not, you're not trying to get him to win. You just want to show people, like, I watch everybody. I know it's like the dudes in college who would play their music and point their speakers out the windows to let people know, like, this is what I listen to. This is how introspective I am. And it's a bunch of crap. And this year, there's no need to vote for a defensive guy, I don't think. But the one year, like when Manti Te'o was getting all of that hype, and that made me angry because it was all just hype. And people were using this as a, like, look what I'm doing. I'm voting for defense. Look how great I am. Look how smart I am. Look how open I am. And meanwhile, I'm tweeting, like, look at Ryan Shazier. Go look at his numbers compared to Manti Te'o and open your eyes to what a linebacker Heisman candidate looks like. But, that's, so I have plenty of beefs with the Heisman, but I don't care enough about it really to care about it and to really, like, take these beefs any further than here or Twitter, which is really, it's just, I'm just in a chair, at home. I'm not really going out anywhere and, like, carrying this to the, I have no placards. I'm not wearing a sandwich board protesting this. It's, it's the Heisman. It's bad. It's dumb. And it's not going anywhere, so I guess try to win it.
Don't play defense, kids.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you're lefty, go try to be long relief. That can give you a long career with decent money and the pros, or maybe golf. But if you do want to win the Heisman, get off of that line. Don't You definitely don't play defense. Throw the ball, run the ball. That's it. If you're going to catch the ball, you better be able to return punts and kicks, and it would help if you play for Notre Dame. So,
and Ndamukong Suh finished 4th in 2009. I just looked that up. I was thinking, did he finish 2nd? No, he finished 4th. That is a joke. That is almost as bad as Orlando Pace not winning in 1996. Like, Ndamukong Suh is one of the best college football players I have ever seen in my life, and he finished 4th behind Mark Ingram, Toby Gerhart, and Colt McCoy. That is a joke.
Yeah, but he's not a very good quarterback.
That's true. Passing stats, 0 for 0. How did he get any votes?
All right. I think we've successfully and correctly ranted. It's not even a rant. It's just factual speaking on the Heisman Trophy. Do you want to get to listener questions?
I would love to get to listener questions. The first one is from Raquel Moran at RAQM0110. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but any movement toward getting Marcus Freeman?
I have not heard anything yet. And, like we said, after the game, movement will start happening for sure. And as I've always said with this, I have heard nothing about this. Like, I keep talking about it. We keep talking about it. It's not because I'm hearing anything. It's just because it makes so much sense.
Right. It makes a ton of sense. And it's been talked about pretty openly by a lot of people. It's been talked about we've talked about it, but it's the kind of thing where there's a lot of overlap between Twitter and message boards and beat writers. And it is a name that makes just perfect sense for Ohio State. And I have not seen anywhere that Marcus Freeman said no. I'm assuming he's been asked about it. I have not seen anywhere where he said, no, I'm not interested. So I think that there's at least reason to think that it's at least a possibility. But, I think you'll find out after the Rose Bowl one way or the other. Next one from Mike Fiore at MJFIORE. Shout out to Bradley 1 1996, one of my hallmates freshman year. Heard a lot of drum banging for Ryan Day, and I get it. But what do you see as his biggest drawback? What's his biggest challenge? I was surprised to hear him say he was going to be super focused on in-state recruiting. Was that a message meant for someone? And on the last one, yup, probably. We talked about him a little earlier in the podcast.
Well, he didn't necessarily say anything differently than what Urban Meyer has said about Ohio. That's obviously going to be their first stop, and that's their first circle. That's their first perimeter that they'll go after. But for me, Tom, his biggest drawback is that he's not Urban Meyer. And he's taking over a program that has expectations that even Urban Meyer couldn't meet. So his biggest drawback is that he's not Urban Meyer and the expectations at the school that he is now working at, that he is now in charge of. And as I've said before, I don't know if it was here or somewhere else, like if he could just be as good as Jim Tressel, which is insane to say, but that's still a step back, but it is good enough. I mean, it should be plenty good for people, but the fact that he is not Urban Meyer, and to expect him to win 90% of his games, I mean, that's asking a lot, but Buckeye fans ask a lot. And so, go get it, Tiger.
Exactly. Go get him, Tiger. Yeah. I mean, it is an unrealistic expectation because Urban Meyer was not just a Hall of Fame coach. Urban Meyer is one of the inner circle greatest college football coaches of all time, period, end of story. And he gets, if anything, Urban Meyer might get a little underrated because he's coaching at the same time as Nick Saban, who is maybe the number one greatest college football coach ever, period, end of story. Better than Newt Rockne, better than anyone else. Like Nick Saban is doing stuff that no one else has ever done. So that maybe makes Urban Meyer look not quite as good as he really should based on results. So, and it's not realistic to expect Ryan Day to live up to that. And of all the drawbacks to him, I think lack of experience is the number one, because this is going to be the first time doing virtually everything, and he can lean on Urban Meyer to some degree behind the scenes, which will help a lot. And he did have that kind of test drive last year where he has led the team out of the tunnel before, he has given the pregame speeches before, he has done all that stuff, but that was very narrow aspects of the job. He was running the program for a month in August when a lot of the stuff is kind of pre-programmed and already set before, long in advance. And then during the season, he coached for 3 games, but he wasn't coaching during the week. He was just coaching on Saturdays. So we talked about it last week in the context of test driving a car. Like, yep, you have a sense for how this thing's going to go, but you have not driven this in every possible type of weather and traffic condition and all of that. So you don't really know. So that is for sure a concern, I think. And I think he'll do reasonably well, but reasonably well is going to be, there are going to be people who think 10-2 was a, cataclysmic failure, which is not a reasonable standard, but that has never stopped anyone before from having opinions. So twitter.com, it's the best. And yeah, like you said, they talk about in-state recruiting all the time, and that's every year Urban Meyer talks about focusing more on Ohio, and then it never happens. So, I think you could certainly read that as a message to Zach Harrison, and but I wouldn't expect them to start signing 13 Ohio kids every year until you see it. Like I think assume it's just kind of more talk until you actually see the change. Next one from Vonder Tinkle. Odds that Ryan Day will bring us to a new age of uniforms.
It's funny that some people were worried because he's not an Ohio guy and he wouldn't understand Ohio State tradition. Leave it to Ohio guy Urban Meyer to go with the alternate uniforms and upset a lot of people and I guess show this not a disdain for tradition, but like, you know what, we can make our own traditions. I don't know, Tom, do you think? I don't expect things to change in terms of alternate uniforms or anything like that.
Well, and there was kind of a follow-up on this that he specified. He was talking about bringing back the uniforms with the gray shoulder stripes. So, I mean, that's based on what we've been told. Urban Meyer prefers the ones that they wear right now, and Jim Tressel preferred the ones that they're wearing right now. They came back under Tressel. Both of those guys coached under Earl Bruce, and that's what the uniforms looked like when they coached under Earl Bruce in the 1980s. Like, that was their firsthand exposure to the Ohio State program, was they were wearing these uniforms, so that's what they think the uniforms look like. If you grew up in the 90s, you think of the gray shoulder stripes, and that's what the uniforms look like. And I grew up in the 90s. That's when I was, really following the team closely for the first time. So that's what I think the uniform should look like. So Ryan Day came in and coached under Urban Meyer. So Ryan Day's first-hand exposure is the current uniforms. So my guess is that you won't see anything change there. But the wild card is Nike may decide, okay, we have sold we have sold replica jerseys of this uniform pattern to all 100,000 people in Ohio Stadium every single Sunday or Saturday. So now let's change back to something else, and then they all have to buy new jerseys. Like that's kind of the wild card, and I would not completely put it past them to do that at some point. All right, next one from @BurnerAccount69. Over under 5 players, including Nick Bosa, leaving early for the draft.
I had to list these players, and it turns out that 5 is a pretty good number. You've got Nick Bosa, Mike Weber, Draymond Jones, KJ Hill are 4 that I believe are gone. Then you've got the 2 cornerbacks who have intended to leave before the season, but did either of them play well enough to do so? Maybe, maybe not, but I still expect both of them to go. So I would go over. Where are you?
I don't think you mentioned Dwayne Haskins on that list, because I had 5 people also.
I did not.
I had 5 people as, I had 5 people as I expect them to go, and that's Nick Bosa, Draymond Jones, Dwayne Haskins, Mike Weber, KJ Hill. So that's 5 right there. So I'm not betting the under. And I think you've got some maybes. I had Arnett and Kendall Sheffield there, and I don't know where those guys go at this point. I don't think, they're not going in Denzel Ward territory. So, would they go if they're a second round grade or a third round grade? Maybe. I don't know. It's a possibility. Michael Jordan is a possibility. I don't know that I expect it. I think he might come back and go play guard next year and have a better chance of getting picked pretty high. Jordan Fuller's another possibility, but I don't necessarily expect him to go. So I would say if I'm going over or under 5, I guess I'd go over because I don't think there's a chance it's under. But it's it might push or it might be 5 to 7 maybe, just with some combination of those guys.
I just think when you come in expecting this to be your last year, it may be tough to get that out of your mind and then come back for a 5th year, or in Kendall Sheffield's case, come back for a 3rd year when you expect, like in 2019, I'm going to be in the NFL. I'm going to be getting paid to do this. That's going to be the start of my professional career. And that might just be too much to go back on. So I'm going over as well for sure.
Okay, next one from @eBronstein. Will Ryan Day be able to keep Grinch at Ohio State since he seems to have some suitors out there? I personally would like to see Grinch solely run the defense, giving his past defenses at Washington State. I also don't think he had very much say this season with Schiano calling the shots. And that's a reference to, there was a report that Oklahoma was looking at Alex Grinch to potentially be their defensive coordinator. So that's the rumor that's out there if you haven't heard that one. If Schiano goes, and I think we said earlier, my assumption is Schiano is probably going to go somewhere else next year. I don't think he's back. I think if it is truly Grinch's defense and he's the head, the really, really, truly the defensive coordinator next year, I think he probably stays. I don't know that Oklahoma is a much more appealing option than Ohio State is. We never got a really good answer on whose defense they were really running this year and what percentage of it was a Greg Schiano defense and what percentage of it was a Alex Grinch defense. My assumption, just based on what they did this year versus last year and how often we talked to Greg Schiano versus how often we talked to Alex Grinch, my assumption is it was at least a mostly Greg Schiano defense this year. So if Alex Grinch has a chance to go out there and run his own defense with, this is still a very talented team. You've still got some really talented players at a lot of spots next year, and you're not losing that much off of this defense. You're getting at least the majority of the defense back next year. I think he probably stays. And I think my guess right now is Schiano goes, Grinch stays, and you bring in Marcus Freeman as a linebackers coach and co-defensive coordinator, and basically Grinch takes the Schiano seat and Freeman takes the Grinch seat, and everyone just kind of slides over one chair, and it's mostly a Grinch defense, but Freeman has some say next year as well.
I agree. Next.
That was easy.
Yeah. You said it all. That's what should happen. You can't get rid of Alex Grinch, or he came over to be the defensive coordinator. So I don't know why he would leave now, especially to go to Oklahoma, where they don't play defense. What are you going to do there?
Yeah, exactly. Every Oklahoma defense looks like this year's Ohio State defense. So
it's not really the way to get a better job.
The difference between the Ohio State defensive meeting rooms and the Oklahoma defensive meeting rooms is that occasionally the Ohio State ones are not on fire. Oklahoma has just been on fire for like 20 years. So next one from @SKnight6383. What will be the most annoying thing we fans obsess over this offseason? I.e., oh, look, another message board thread on fill in the blank.
Tom, I guess the quarterback battle, maybe?
Correct answer.
Yeah, I don't know what else really there is to hyper focus on other than that, because that's the easiest thing and that's the most important thing, and it's going to be right there for you.
Yeah, I think that the Tate Martell versus Matthew Baldwin quarterback battle, and then you'll have your Chugs people and you'll have your Dwan Mathis people, but you'll have that whole element. So you have, just the open quarterback position always just gets beaten into the ground. And I look forward to doing that for the next 9 months.
Yeah, we've got time.
But the underrated part of this is the side conversations about what would this offense look like if Joe Burrow was still here? Would this offense be better if Joe Burrow was still here? That's what you're going to be sick about hearing between now and September.
Are you saying he could transfer back?
I do believe I saw video that he was on campus at Ohio State on Monday or Tuesday this week back home. So I think I don't know that we can officially report that he is definitely transferring back to Ohio State, but sources.
It's safe to speculate.
When isn't it safe to speculate? Theinternet.com, it's safe to speculate. Next one from Indiana Buckeye. What did Ryan Day learn as a temporary head coach in the first 3 games of 18 that will most help him as a permanent head coach in 2019?
I think he learned the scheduling of it, the tasks of it, the handling of it, but I think you learn everything. Like everything you're doing for the first time, the second time, the third time, that becomes easier the fourth time, and it just becomes part of your routine. But it also allowed his team to see him, the defensive guys to see him and respond to him, and allowed him to even make this transition easier because the players have seen it in action and have seen it work in action. So I think what he learned was that I think a main thing is that, yeah, I want to do this, because getting that job for 3 games could also prove to you that, you know what? I don't really want this. This is I don't care for this. I don't care for that. This is a bit much. And I'm glad I found out before I signed a 4-year deal for $25 million or whatever. So he learned that he wants the job. He learned how to do it in the fashion that he did it. But he also learned that, he will have freedoms that he didn't have before, and it'll be interesting to see how he branches out from what Urban Meyer did, and how closely he stays to, I guess, Shore, But I think more than anything, he learned that, I could do this, and he showed that.
Yeah, I think he passed his first test, and we talked earlier that this is not the final exam, but the quiz at the end of week 1, he passed it. So that's good. Of all the things you could have done, you did the thing that was the better thing that you did. So good job. I think there's probably a couple things that are maybe more soft kind of factors of the job. The importance of delegating. I mean, he was the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator and the head coach for those first 3 Saturdays. And I remember him talking after one of those games about that's a lot. That's a lot to try and juggle all at once. So you are going to have to delegate some of your stuff. You really cannot do all 3 things at the same time. So that I think is probably something he's going to be able to take away from that. And then maybe some of the off-field stuff. This is probably the first time he's had to do the coaches show and all the media availabilities and all that kind of stuff. Just, that's not a huge part of your week, but it's like one more thing you've got to do and fit into your schedule and think about. And, this is, you're walking into a room and talking to a group of whatever, how many people are in there normally, 40 or so people on the beat. I mean, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, and you don't know what you're going to get questions about, and sometimes you're going to get questions about stuff you don't want to talk about. And he did a real nice job handling that stuff earlier this year. I mean, when he was asked about the Zach Smith stuff, he came out before the questions were even asked and just said, "Look, this is all reports on stuff that happened before I got here. I don't know. I don't really have anything to add. So, sorry, I don't like. I know you want to ask, but I don't really have anything to say." And that just kind of diffused the situation. So he did a nice job with handling that, and I think he. Let's see, how can I put this delicately? I think he probably will take media instruction better than some past Ohio State coaches have. Maybe that's one way I could put that. And that will probably be to his long-term benefit. So that's good. So that's a lesson he probably learned in August and September. So, I think there's stuff that he learned, but it's not, he did not uncover the Holy Grail during those first those first 3 weeks, but it's like useful information. It's just one less thing you got to learn this year. So
yeah, when he first got back, his first week not being the head coach, and somebody asked him, "Hey, what are you going to be doing Thursday at noon?" Which is normally when the coach's show is, and then he laughed. He's like, I finally won't have to do that. I'll be able to go look at film or recruit or whatever. And like you said, it's just there's always something, and even Urban, even Urban now, as powerful as he is, still has to answer to these media obligations. They're in your contract. They're, you look at the term sheet for Ryan Day, and there's like $10,000 for like a Coca-Cola appearance or something. I mean, you are the most important employee in Ohio, but you still have to go shake hands, and you still have to go do appearances, and you still have to be on a radio show. And even though John Cooper used to be on it for 2 hours, and Urban Meyer only has to be on it for 37 minutes, you still got to do it.
Yep. I do remember you and I were walking into the Woody. It might have been the week after he was done being the head coach. It might have been like Tulane week, where we were walking in and he was walking out, and it was like, "Hey, where are you going?" He's like, "I don't have to do this anymore." So I don't think he looked disappointed to not have to do that on Mondays, but if that's the worst thing he has to do as part of this job, that's not too bad. So next one from the displaced Buckeye. Who are the apparent leaders on next year's team?
J.K. Dobbins, I think is going to be one. Austin Mack, Tough Borland, obviously. I do, like you said, I think Jordan Fuller will be back, and he's a captain. If you've seen like Keandre Jones, you don't see him on defense, but he is a team leader. He'll be one of those guys. Michael Jordan, obviously. I think Tate Martell is going to be one of those guys too, Tom. I mean, there's every position will have somebody, but I don't know who. Do you have like 3 or 4 guys that you think like these are the guys?
I had exactly the list you just had, including Keandre Jones. And the only other 2 names I had on there were Robert Landers and Chase Young.
Yeah.
And, Robert Landers is going to be, he's a senior next year, right? He should be.
Finally.
I think, yep. So, yeah, he's a senior next year. I mean, he is a gregarious personality. He is, I think it's safe to say he is beloved on that team and beloved by the media and just a nice, good kid. He'll be a 3rd-year starter next year. I think he for sure on there is on there. And I think Chase Young, we have not talked to Chase Young as much as we have some of these other guys this year. But next year, he's a 3rd-year player. I think he maybe slides into that Nick Bosa kind of position where even if he's not necessarily the most outgoing guy or the most, he's not the guy that they roll out for media availabilities every week. I think just by virtue of how good he could be next year, I think he's going to almost be forced into that position. And, I think he's not uncomfortable talking to the media. He does a nice job during interviews. We just don't see him a ton. I think that there's a pretty good chance that he becomes one of those people we see pretty frequently next year. Next one from Buck the World. How did Ryan Day respond after Purdue?
I don't know.
I mean, schematically, they went back to the fundamentals in the run game and pound the ball, run the ball up the middle, and all that. But I don't know how much of that to ascribe to Ryan Day versus Urban Meyer, because that seems like what Urban Meyer would have wanted to do in that situation too. So
Ryan Day was a good soldier.
Yeah, we didn't talk to Ryan Day after the Purdue game. I don't remember if we talked to Ryan Day in the week after the Purdue game. We may have, but you never know when the head coach's expertise is kind of on the same side of the ball as you are the coordinator. You never know quite how much to, blame or credit to assign to one of them versus the other.
Yeah, and really it was Ryan Day. I mean, the offense went back to running the ball as they had been. I think that's when they went away from the RPOs, and it was more as much mentality as anything else. And that was an entire coaching staff doing that. That wasn't just Ryan Day or Greg Stadrawa. I mean, it was a coordinated message from Urban Meyer. So I guess the play calling, you would say, got better because they went away from stuff that was causing them issues. So in that way, he learned from that. But again, you're playing Nebraska's defense, so you should be doing well. Then the next week at Michigan State against a tough defense, you find a way to get it done, and then the floodgates open. So I guess they scored 62 or 55 points against Michigan, so I guess that's a pretty good eventual response as well.
That was actually a Mirage. I'm not sure if you knew that.
Sorry. But hey, you know what?
Full circle, baby. If
you can respond with a Mirage, that's still pretty impressive. It's like David Copperfield stuff, you know?
I'm going to make your playoff bid disappear.
Where did
First
it go?
The Statue of Liberty, now this.
They went to Columbus again.
Next one from KJS. What is your over-under for coaches leaving, and who do you see being retained? He says his over-under is 3. You guys got to start setting these over-unders at something and a half, so we can't just say push.
Yeah, I'll say when I'm trying to think of who is going to leave, I started like, how close are they to Urban Meyer? And I don't think Greg Studrawa needs to go anywhere, but he's close to Urban Meyer, so maybe he leaves. Bill Davis, I believe, will be gone. Greg Schiano, I believe, will be gone. And we've said it, I think we talked about it last week, like, I don't know that anybody else, I could see everybody else staying. But that doesn't mean I couldn't see Tony Alford leaving or Larry Johnson retiring but I guess maybe I would be surprised if more than 3 left. If I had to go over or under 3, I guess I would go under, just assuming it would be Bill Davis and Greg Schiano. Because I don't know if I see 4, although I wouldn't be shocked by it, but I don't know that I want to put my money on it.
Yeah, I think the safe bet here is a push, because I think I'm right with you. I think Schiano and Davis are very likely to go. And then I think that someone else goes. I'm not confident enough to say, yep, the third guy is going to be fill in the blank. But, it could be Studrawa. It could be, Kevin Wilson may be looking for a head coaching job. I mean, he has been here 2 years now. That's the standard term. And so if he's looking for a head coaching job, maybe he goes. We addressed the Alex Grinch rumors earlier. I don't think he leaves, but it's at least a possibility. Those 2 plus someone is probably the most likely, but yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable betting over, but I also don't think it's going to go under. So I guess I would be more likely to go over, just because I don't think there's a chance it's really 2. I would be very surprised if it was 2, and I wouldn't be like totally shocked if it was 4. So I guess I would, if I had to go over under, I'd go over, but I think 3 is probably the right answer.
Yeah, when I was going through my head, I didn't even think of Kevin Wilson. So I would be more likely to go over than under, and maybe more likely to go over than a push. So like you said, go 3.5 next time, or go 0.5 next time, and make it more difficult.
All right, next one from Wheatbuck. What rules or equipment adjustments might improve viewer/attender experience without sacrificing safety or competitive fairness? Example of disruptive or disappointing infractions: pass interference, holding, face mask violations, offensive false start when the defense stops the play, baffling decisions on reviewed or not stopped reviewed plays, timeout called in the last second on field goal attempts, and for that matter on other types of plays as well.
I don't mind the play, the clock stopping on first downs and stopping when it goes out of bounds with 2 minutes or whatever to go in a quarter. I don't think you need to change anything in terms of play. You just need to shorten the commercials, or have ads on the field superimposed so that they're getting their advertising in without making this game take 4 hours on Fox. We don't need all of these full media timeouts when you could read the ad, or, like I said, superimpose it, or there are ways, split screen it during stoppages in play, which there are plenty of. Players get injured, throw a commercial on the side. There are other ways to shorten these games. You could get them in 3.5 hours if you try. They're just not trying.
Yeah, I think that there was a decision made a while ago that the most important thing in all of college sports was maximizing TV revenue. Like, that is what they decided. This is what we're going to do. And whatever we have to do to make that happen, we're going to do. And at some point that has to change. And I think you could go the World Cup route. When the World Cup is on TV, they're not interrupting play during the first and second half for commercial breaks. They just put the advertiser name up next to the score bug, or they, have ads around the field on rotating billboards, or they superimpose an ad on the field, or whatever it is. But yeah, that is the easiest way to not materially impact the game and still shorten it. Like, just lop one commercial break out of every commercial, one commercial out of every commercial break, and that would make a pretty big difference just in terms of what the in-stadium user experience is like. And if you could knock one commercial out of every break and also one commercial break out of every half, that would make an even bigger difference. Because it's just miserable to sit in the stadium and just wait through 4 minutes, and then they come back and run 2 plays, and then someone calls a timeout, and you have to wait through another 4 minutes. Like, it feels endless in the stadium. So, but if you wanted to change something in the game, just get rid of keep the clock moving when it's not the last 5 minutes of the first half and the fourth quarter of the game or something like that. Like, you want to do away with the clock stops on the first downs for those. That's fine. Do something like that. Keep it for the last 5 minutes of the half and the last quarter of the game because that does make comebacks and last second drives more feasible and more exciting. So I would keep it for those moments. But does the clock really need to stop with 9.5 minutes left in the first quarter just to reset the chains? Probably not. Like, that's something they could change that wouldn't materially impact anything. But yes, shorten the TV breaks. That's the actual answer. Pancake75, does Schiano only leave if he gets a head coaching job? We kind of talked about this earlier as well. Yeah,
did we both agree, no? Like, there could be other reasons for him to leave, one of which would be like Ryan Day saying, you know what, I think we're going to go in a different direction. So I think he could leave for any number of reasons, and a job would not be one of them, actually,
Yeah, and I mean, I could certainly see him leaving for an NFL gig too. I think I talked about that a little earlier, but you could leave and go be the defensive coordinator for the, I don't know, Chicago Bears or something, and that looks like a perfectly reasonable career move, and no one's going to say you got forced out, and that sets you up to be able to run a more complex defense because you have more time with the players and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think there's lots of stuff he could do that would be something other than being a head coach at the college level and being Ohio State's defensive coordinator next year. But next one from Monique Fredrickson. Urban Meyer said the product was suffering this year. What will Day add to eliminate the annual road trip brain spaz?
He's going to eliminate that dang pink contract, Tom. He ain't got time for that family stuff. He's going to get his team focused and ready, and he will sleep in his office to prepare his team, and he will make his team sleep in the office. 105 guys in one office. That will keep them from having their annual road trip failure. It's like a sleepover.
I think Jim Harbaugh tried that. It hasn't worked out great for him. So,
well, you know what? We can work out the kinks. No kinks at the sleepover though. We don't want to do that.
I do think it's worth just sort of, we've talked about this before, but reiterating, like, you are not going to eliminate you're going to lose a road game every year kind of just on average. That is a function of 18 to 21-year-old males working together as a team and not necessarily always being 100% focused. And you're playing in a league where the 6-6 teams are good enough that if you're not really focused, they can beat you. So you can lose to Iowa, you can lose to Purdue. I think the real, and I think you go into every year assuming they are going to lose a game. I never pick a team to go undefeated because just on average, it is very, very hard to go undefeated. Even if you've got a loaded team, it's very hard to go undefeated. So that's just worth keeping in mind. I think the fair question here is not losing a game on the road, but just getting obliterated on the road. Like, just how do you keep them from not, keep them from quitting like they did at Purdue this year? Like, it went from 35-20 to 49-20, and those 2 touchdowns probably kept them out of the playoff. And that was the last 4 minutes of the game, and focus wanes a little bit at that point. You're lost. You were not expecting to lose this game. You're bummed out, and you don't finish the drill. And if I had the answer on what they were going to do to fix that, I would be making a whole lot more money than I am right now. That is a $4 million a year answer, and I don't have it. But that's the answer they need to figure out.
Yeah, and when you look at next year's road schedule, when I see at Nebraska week 5, I see that as a loss.
That's not good. There's next year's schedule is not real friendly for Ohio State. At Michigan, at Nebraska,
at Northwestern,
Penn State the week before Michigan, at Northwestern is dicey.
Wisconsin,
Cincinnati,
Columbus,
yeah, Cincinnati at home. You think Luke Fickell's not going to be out to prove a point against Ryan Day next year? Like, there's a lot of games on there that if they're not focused, they could lose next year. And I think they'll probably be pretty focused for most of them, but on average, you're gonna drop 1 or 2. That is how college football works.
Yeah,
exactly. That is how college football works. So, next one from @ChipMinix. Do we know the spring game date? Nebraska and Notre Dame have announced for April 13th, 2019. Does that seem like Ohio State will have the same date? I went back and looked. Last year was April 14th.
Yeah,
so that would be the same weekend. The following weekend is Easter, so that's April 21st. That weekend is Easter, so they're probably not going to do it that weekend. Anything before that, it's kind of cold and crappy. So I would say it's either going to be April 14th or April 28th. And I'm supposed to go to Atlanta with my brothers for a Mets-Braves series that weekend, April 14th. So that will 100% be what that weekend is, and I'll have to cancel my trip. So, I think just based solely on my personal inconvenience, I think that is almost certainly the weekend it's going to be.
I can't argue with that.
Yep, it's just science. Next, last one from @Eric Miles RE. How many hot dogs and beers will you guys crush at my makeshift sedan trunk tailgate at the Red Flower Bowl?
Well, here's the problem, Tom. Is the tailgate, is it a pregame or a postgame? Is it both? I assume it's probably just pregame, right?
My assumption generally with tailgating is pregame, yes.
Yeah, so we can't get too hammered before the game because we do have to work the game. And then there's working after the game. But then after the game, there's also more drinking. So you got to pace yourself, really. You don't want to be – it's okay to be a little drunk while you're working. We all know that. Okay, we know that. Everybody knows that. It's okay to be a little drunk.
Ron Howard narrator voice. It isn't. I chose to focus on the other side of this particular question, the hot dogs side of it. And I was trying to remember, I did the Dime a Dog Eat Your Age thing at the Clippers game when I was in college. So I was probably 20 or 21 at that time, and I tried to eat my age, which, if you are not from Columbus, the AAA team in Columbus does a promotion periodically called Dime a Dog Day, where you can buy hot dogs for 10 cents. And so you go and you try and eat your age. So if you're 20, you try and eat 20 hot dogs, or if you're 25, you try and eat 25. I will be 40 by the time the Rose Bowl rolls around, so I will definitely not be trying to eat my age. And I will tell you, even at 20, that is not a very feasible thing to do. That was I got to 16 or 17 or so, if I remember correctly, and my roommate looked at me and said, "You're actually turning green." So that was I definitely did not eat. That was like a lunchtime. I definitely did not eat the rest of that day. I don't know that I ate most of the next day either. Like, that was just, and however dehydrated you have ever felt in your life, like the amount of sodium in your body, if you try and do that, it's a lot. So I don't know, maybe 2 hot dogs for me. Thanks.
I only did Dime a Dog once. And the thing I didn't like is everybody's in line, but you can only get 5 at a time. And there were no condiments. So you're just eating like plain hot dogs. And so I think I got to 5, obviously, but I probably only ate 3 or 4 because there's no ketchup in the Tom, as we all know. you got to have ketchup on your hot dog, right?
My 5-year-old certainly thinks so. So you have that in common.
But also, here's the thing. It's the food that we're going to get fed at the Rose Bowl. No offense, Eric. We ain't eating no stinking hot dogs. All right. We're going to have like fine cuisines provided for us. If I eat a hot dog that entire week, I am going to be mad. All right. It's going to be like steaks, like fancy tacos, seafood soups, crazy stuff. And if I'm like eating a hot dog, it's because I am so hammered at that point that all I want is just give me a hot dog, something like that. Which, you know what? That could be before the game.
I do like the fact that as you're running through all the fancy things you're listing, soups, fancy stuff like that. Like, oh, soup. Oh my. Pardon me, Mr. Rockefeller. I didn't realize we were having soup.
You eat it with a spoon.
I am asking this. This is not information that will be useful for any listeners whatsoever. But have you heard that the food is good at the Rose Bowl, or are you just merely speculating based on the caliber of the game and the organization that runs it? Because I have not heard any scouting reports on the meals or food or anything at the Rose Bowl as of yet.
No, I have not. I'm just basing this on my experience at the Fiesta Bowl, which is also west of us. So, in my experience, food west of us is pretty good. So,
do you think they have soup at the Heart of Dallas Bowl? Oh man,
probably not. I would imagine only they have probably just dry foods there.
Okay.
Whereas West Coast, like I had some soup at the Fiesta Bowl, so I'm assuming there's probably soup at most what we call the BCS bowls, because soup, BCS,
big crock of soup. There you go.
Yeah, I think that's the show for today. Is that correct? Are we done? We are so done.
Yes, we're done. We stopped entertaining or informing the listeners about 3 minutes ago, so now we're definitely done.
So many people tuned out before they got to hear about soup. Maybe we'll lead with the 101st show. We'll lead with the soup in case the people who tuned out missed this, because you shouldn't miss this.
No, I think you don't mention it again, and then while you're out at the Rose Bowl, you just tweet out a picture of soup and just have heads exploding all over Twitter. Like, what is this madness? What are they feeding you? Is that chicken and noodles in a bowl? Witchcraft.
Whatever, Tom. You want some soup, but I was thinking we should probably do podcasts for every meal while we're there, especially if there's soup. We'll see. But thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. We are all here every week. Check out the content at theozone.net, all of the stuff going on right now. We will be talking to 20 players on Wednesday. So that is going to be a lot of stuff that we'll be writing about all week. And then we'll probably be talking about what we've seen, heard, read, wrote next week as well. And there is always something going on, so something will happen between now and the next time we talk to you. There will be no weekend show, Tom. Correct?
I'm not planning on doing a weekend show this weekend. Unless something big happens, like unless Ohio State hires a new head coach or there's someone makes soup. I'm not planning on doing a show.
Emergency podcast. I found some Dinty Moore beef stew. All right. Let's go ahead and call it a night. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week.